All right. Hello and welcome to our next installment of of Lexington Books' Anthropology of Tourism author conversation series. I'm your host, Michael Giovine. I'm actually the series editor of Lexington Books series, the Anthropology of Tourism, Heritage, Mobility, and Society. And just to give you a quick blurb, we're going to do an introduction here. For those of you who have done these webinars, come to these webinars before, welcome again. It's great to see so many people that have popped on before. I want to also, extend a welcome to our guests, students, and my students as well. I have students from my cultural heritage class and also my intro to cultural heritage class. I do see I'm recording, so thank you. Thanks, Liz, for letting me know. But it says recording, so let's cross our fingers that it actually is. So the anthropology, for those of you who don't know, the Anthropology of Tourism, Heritage, Mobility, and Society series is a book series with Lexington Books and Rowman & Littlefield publishers that provides anthropologists, but not just anthropologists, any real any social scientists or those in the humanities who have cutting edge research on the cultures and the cultural aspects of tourism and heritage. The series embraces anthropology's holistic and comprehensive approach to scholarship, and is sensitive to the complex diversity of human expression. So I do want to emphasize that we've had, for the majority of our books, I got them over here, in the series, we have about 13, 14 books published so far. Many of them are written by anthropologists, but not all of them. And in fact, we've had a great recent webinar by Sagar Singh, was the most recent one. Another one by a group of people on wellness tourism, which I really think, if you haven't watched that one or read the book by Brian Grimwood and et al., there are 4 editors, Heather Mayer, Heather Muldoon, please do. It's a great book. But today we are talking about with an anthropologist from Mexico, Sergio Gonzalez Varela, who is actually, he was on a Fulbright here at my university as well, and we've gotten to know him quite well. So it's really wonderful to have you here. I want to, basically, before I introduce you fully, just give you a little bit, give everybody like the ground rules here. It's a webinar. So again, that means that your cameras and microphone are turned off until the question and answer period, where I will be monitoring the Q&A button. So if you see on the bottom here, you have a couple of things like Q&A and chat. I'll look at the chat, and please don't hesitate to send me any points that you have, but ask your questions in the Q&A. And what I'll do is when it's time for the Q&A session, I'll ask you to come up, and I'll open your microphone and your camera, and you can actually be on screen as a panelist. And it's worked well in the past. My students, especially, they read your book, they had to ask questions, and actually they're really great. So I do hope to have some time for that today. So welcome. We have anthropologist Sergio Gonzalez Varela, who's a professor of anthropology at the University of San Luis Potosi in Mexico, studying capoeira. So how you doing, Sergio?
Hey, Michael, nice to meet you. Yes, I'm Sergio. Yes, I've been doing capoeira for around 20 years, a little bit more than 20 years, I realize. And I'm really, really happy to have the opportunity to talk about my research with you and your students, and also with some of my students who are also here in the panel and the webinar. So yeah, I'm fine. I'm just very excited to talk about my research.
Yeah. We were just talking before you came out. We're waiting for the vaccine, so we're gonna get the vaccine
today. Yes.
Today's Cinco de Mayo, so you got a holiday vaccine coming today for everyone. And again, of course, this is being shot during a pandemic. At the end of the pandemic, I do want to finish up kind of my questions about how it's been especially for in your field site on the pandemic. But I think we should just start by asking, what is capoeira? I mean, you even in your book, you kind of say it's a little bit hard to define. People have different definitions, of course. Some people call it religious practices. Some people call it, martial art, dance, gang violence kind of a thing that you talk about. So what is capoeira?
Well, it's a great question that not only me, but all capoeira practitioners ask themselves. It's because capoeira is kind of a holistic practice because it's a little bit of everything, a little bit of martial art. Yeah, it has a martial art as a kind of combat practice that you learn with the techniques and skills. There is at the same time a kind of ritual act because it has a lot of spirituality, a lot of kind of rules, and it's definitely a moment outside the daily life of people, I would say like that, not like a special time and space, and in a circle, it's called roda, no? And then at the same time, it's music because capoeira implies live music. So as a practitioner, you need to learn, everybody needs to learn music too. You have to play instruments and how to sing in Portuguese. You need to learn Portuguese as well. At the same time, it's also kind of like, it's play because then you have a lot of fun. It has a very joking aspect of capoeira, very playful, but at the same time, it's kind of dangerous. It's kind of violent in some cases. And then it has three different styles. So every style also emphasizes different aspects. No? But yeah, with capoeira, many teachers, when I ask them the same question, what is capoeira at the end of all these things? They come with kind of very, very vague and kind of wide answers. No? But one of the definition that I like from a teacher, Mr. Cobra Mancha, he said, well, capoeira in a sense is a way of life. No? It's like kind of way of life that involves all these kind of bodily movements and techniques and music. No? But then it creates some kind of way of life, something like that. No?
And,
like
and you, I mean, and you yourself are a practitioner, right?
Yes.
I mean, you do capoeira.
Indeed. Yes,
right?
indeed. Yeah, I'm a practitioner. Yes, I
you can play the
2000.
instruments and sing in Portuguese.
Everything. Yeah, I had to learn. I had to learn from the beginning, you know, the music, how to get the instruments, how to play the 8 instruments. There are 8 instruments in the capoeira orchestra. And then the movements, and then how to learn how to play and interact with other people.
I should actually just show your book. I forgot to even mention we were talking.
Book, yes.
You're the author of Capoeira Brazilian Tourism, but you can see here too. You know, you see that rota, right? The people in a circle.
And that's my teacher in yellow, Mr. Bocadorio, with whom I know since 2004 or 5, something like that. Yes.
So my question, you know, in talking about this, is a way of life and everything. I mean, how does one get into capoeira? I mean, is it? I mean, obviously, I want to ask how you did, but I mean, even these teachers, these mestre, right? How you call it? How do they come up? How do they get into the capoeira?
Well, in Brazil, yes, it's part of the popular culture. It's like samba, it's like football. No, in many regions, in the northeast, in Salvador, in the city of Salvador, the state of Bahia, normally known as Bahia, in Rio de Janeiro and in Sao Paulo, at least the big centers of the big cities, and in capoeira is kind of part of popular culture. So you can see it in the streets, for instance, in festivals, but also you have the special academies where you learn, you go and you learn, and it's part since I guess 1950s. It's part of the popular culture in Brazil. No? That is very different from the context of capoeira abroad. No? In other countries, is similar to what happens to other martial arts. No? That you get an academy, you get to know somebody, a local practitioner who more or less knows capoeira, and you go and try to see what it is about, no? Because you don't have an idea. Then you go and you start practicing, you start getting to know people as well, and then they always tell you, oh, by the way, but this really, if you really need to know, you really want to know capoeira, you need to train with a kind of authorized teacher, you know, with a mestre, you know? And that's how they start talking about mestres. And then if you are lucky enough, then one mestre suddenly would appear there to teach capoeira or give a seminar, they call it, no? Workshops, no? Abroad, no? But in Brazil, it's part of popular culture. So everybody is kind of exposed to capoeira, at least visually, yes. No?
Right.
And some styles are more popular than others. There is one that is very acrobatic, very kind of related to art and to ballet and to dance, no? Contemporary dance, so it's called Capoeira Contemporánea. And this is the capoeira that began the global expansion in the 70s and in the 80s. The other one, regional, was created in Salvador, in Bahia, so it's more local as well, and it's similar to this contemporánea, but it's more without any acrobatics. And then you have the one that I studied, that I've been practicing for 20 years, that is called Capoeira Angola, that is conceived by the practitioners as the most traditional capoeira, that emphasizes a lot of rules, a lot of techniques, a lot of way of being, of behaving yourself. And this capoeira it exists obviously everywhere in the world, but it doesn't have the same impact, even visual impact than the other capoeira. So and then you depend a lot on a teacher to learn.
So, you know, when you say Capoeira Angola, I mean, it's referencing the fact that it is this hybrid or this syncretic kind of a form that was brought over from kind of West Africa, from the African context.
Well, yes, as I mentioned in chapter 1, it's part of the kind of mythology of capoeira, the mythological narrative about where capoeira came from, no? From the slave trade, and traces its origins to Africa, no? Particularly Angola and Benin. Actually, many historians, like kind of famous historians, they've been studying the origins of capoeira. They have traveled to Angola, to Benin, to different places to try to locate different combat practices similar to capoeira. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have a lot of very rich history of slavery in Brazil, where you find references to capoeira. And this traditional capoeira at some point said, well, we need to emphasize this African connection. That's why. Also, they call it Capoeira Angola. Also, there's still a lot of debate about who and why they call it Capoeira Angola. No? Mm. But there is also an Afro-Brazilian religion from the same region called Candomblé that also has different types of Candomblé like Capoeira. And one of them is Jeje Ketu, and the other one is Angola, for instance. No? So they also have Candomblé Angola. Also, they are not necessarily related to Capoeira because of the name. No? But yeah, it's Angola because to emphasize the African character of Capoeira. This is what I think. Some teachers say that. No?
Well, I mean, my next question was going to be, what is any connection with Candomblé, for example, you know, which has, you know, trance, spirit possession kind of ideas here. I mean, when people say capoeira could be considered in some form of religion or a way of life, I mean, how does that work? You know, like how is it I don't think people say karate is a religion, although it is certainly a way of life.
It has a spirituality there, no? But yeah, in the case of capoeira, for instance, there is it's a very close connection to candomblé, because many leaders, capoeira teachers, they are related to candomblé, or they were part of candomblé before. They could be, for instance, Christians. So now there is a big evangelic movement in capoeira, but before they were part of candomblé, they grew up practicing this religion, and they incorporated a lot of things like to incorporate all these elements to capoeira, no? And then they have a connection. A lot of songs are sung in candomblé and in capoeira. There's a lot of similarities. However, even to say capoeira's religion is candomblé is kind of wrong, because you get a lot of practitioners who are not, or they don't know anything about candomblé, who adopt this kind of spirituality from capoeira about the ancestors, for instance. They always talk about the ancestors, the dead masters, the slaves and Africans ancestors coming into the game, whatever. No? So what I'm saying in one of the chapters is precisely that capoeira has all these Afro-Brazilian influences, but also creates its own form of spirituality close to religion, and creating this kind of way of life. But it's a way of life very strange, because capoeira's movement and logic of practice is based on deception and cunning and deception, no? Very kind of Brazilian ethos, we call it, no? People from the streets, live in the streets, no? If you live in the streets, like in Salvador, in Rio de Janeiro, you need to be smart-wise. You need to know how to, streetwise, know how to more or less deal with a kind of uncertain environment. And they say that this ethos of deception and cunning that is part of capoeira's logic, create this kind of way of life. And that's why many leaders and many practitioners develop this kind of deceptive way of acting related to this spirituality of all masters and all teachers. That issue brings a lot of questions about some kind of, is there morality or there is no morality in capoeira because of this kind of deceptive attitudes that you find in the student and teacher relationship? That's why also I discuss these issues. But yeah, I definitely think that capoeira has its own spirituality. It's kind of religious attitudes, but based in this kind of ambiguous ethic of deception.
And that's why I think, you know, sometimes it gets a bad rap, right? It gets a little bit, at least originally, you know, before it was designated intangible heritage and everything else, you know, there was some association with, you know, gang violence and things like that. Why? Were there any real connect, like any leaders did demonstrably, you know, gang-related activities, or they just kind of associate the deception with?
The origins of capoeira as a practice was urban, and it was in the streets. Yeah, of course, there was no academies. Before 1930s, there were no academies. So people played capoeira like samba in festivals and in the streets. No? And the people who played capoeira, people that played capoeira, were actually people who were unemployed, most of them black, poor, and most of them related to criminal activities. Some of them were pimps, some of them they were workers in the ports too, and even policemen were part of capoeira. They knew capoeira. It was kind of part of the street performances of at least from Salvador and also in Rio de Janeiro. Also, capoeira in Rio de Janeiro has a slightly different story because their history is really during the 19th century, capoeira in Rio de Janeiro was really related to gangs called maltas. Yes, and then you have documents that actually, many capoeiristas they were involved in this kind of gangs called maltas. But in Salvador, there were some people who were maestros capoeira who were related to maltas, but they were never really popular. Maltas in Salvador. However, there were a lot of capoeira teachers later who were always related to kind of criminal activities. They were like 2 or 3 masters, very famous, that everybody knew that they were kind of also doing a lot of illegal activities. No, they were like criminals, really, basically. And they were also capoeira teachers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's really fascinating. So then how, and I guess this is the crux of your book too, but then how did you get involved in this? Speaking of criminal activity, no.
Well, the story of how I got involved in capoeira appears in my first book, in my other book.
Yes, that's your main book, yeah.
My main book, it was a kind of ethnography. It was a monography about capoeira in Salvador, my experience and the work that I did there about the body, about playful violence, about the notion of power and social relations among the people and academies in Salvador. But in that book, I started saying how I got involved in capoeira. That is basically, I was doing my undergraduate dissertation at the time in a central neighborhood of Mexico City, well, in the south, that is called Coyoacan. And then I saw a flyer that announced that there was capoeira classes. So I just went to show up and then it was a white guy. He was a normal person. He wasn't Brazilian at all, but he was really good. And we trained in his garage. So he had to take his car outside, and it was all full of oil and very, very dirty. I said, "Oh, we're going to train capoeira here because in Brazil they train like that." He had gone to Brazil.
There you go.
So we started training. I started
the imaginary
capoeira with this guy. Yeah, the imaginary. I said, "Okay." So I started training. I really like it. Very small space, whatever. And then by coincidence, later, I talked to my thesis director in Mexico City, and I was talking to her about, I started practicing capoeira. She was a very, very kind woman. So we're talking about it. I said, I'm learning capoeira, whatever. And then she started telling me, oh, by the way, you said in Coyoacan? I said, yes. Well, is this guy, his name is not ta-ta-tam? So, yeah, actually, Bob, I know him. So why? How? No? Well, he's my son-in-law. No, my sister is dating him, so that's why I know him. No? So he's very cool, whatever. Connection. So then we got this connection, and then started getting to know this capoeira teacher, very good friend of mine until today, and that's how I got involved into capoeira. But then he started switching to other kind of styles that I didn't like a lot. So then we part ways, and then I discovered this Grupo Capoeira Angola, and then coincided exactly with the arrival of a capoeira teacher from Brazil, Mr. Pedrinho. And then I started training with him in Mexico for 2.5 years. And then
you did your PhD in London, right?
London, yeah. UK. UCL, yes.
And you were able to continue practicing there as well.
Oh yeah, me and another two friends, we had a group in London. When I arrived in London, I discovered that, wow, the capoeira scene in London was much, much richer and more kind of interactive, and there was more energy than in Mexico City. There were a lot of groups, and there were a lot of maestros, teachers, like circulating, coming and going. So I got to know a lot of teachers, and two friends of mine and I, we had a group there. At that time, it was called Capoeira Angola London, very creative. So for like 4 years, more or less, we had that group. And then later, my other friend was American. He went back to the States, and I came to Mexico. So we left the group to the other guy, and he continued actually the work. But then, yeah, we were teaching capoeira in London, and then I went to Brazil. And when I arrived in Brazil, in Salvador, then I already had some contacts, like people who knew some people. So more or less, I knew whom to talk and where to stay for the beginning. Like for the first 2 weeks, I stayed at a friend's house she was from Bahia, and she said, well, we had a flat there in a nice area. If you want it, here are the keys. And then she said, go and call my sister when you arrive. So, and she will give you the keys. So I stayed for 2 weeks in their flat, and then I moved to a central neighborhood in a kind of favela in the center, we'll say, when there were 2 or 3 famous academies. So I stayed there for 1 year and a half, or 18 months, something like that. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, so this is the crux of this book, actually, is your story. Because unlike the other, your dissertation book, the first book on capoeira, this one really talks about mobility and kind of the movement of capoeira, through globalization, through tourism, through global imaginaries. I mean, what I like about this book is that you see that even though, so you got this Brazilian art form way of life that has mythologically has a narrative that it came from somewhere else. You got the mobility there. And then, you came to it in Mexico, you practiced it in London, you went and traveled like so many do, back to train with Mestre. Of course, you were studying as well, so you got the fieldwork aspect. The crux of this book is really about the globalization of capoeira. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, when did it become a global phenomenon, and what are the differences, between these different, different art forms, let's say?
Well, yes, capoeira became global starting in the 1970s when practitioners linked it to contemporary dance ballet. They traveled to the US and to Europe, and they were performing capoeira as part of the spectacle. So there was a very famous capoeira practitioner who traveled to New York together with others, and Doremil Machado, his name is, I remember. And he liked so much New York and it was so popular, so he decided to stay. So basically stay illegally for some years in the US, teaching capoeira in the late 70s, 80s. No, so he was actually him, and later other of his friends in California started really teaching capoeira, capoeira regional and capoeira contemporánea. So they were actually the first ones who started capoeira, as far as I know. And some other teachers also started traveling to London, for instance. But all of them part of dance companies. Just but the way they could travel, and they decided to stay. And it was later on in the middle of the 90s, late 90s, that other capoeira teachers from other traditions, like Capoeira Angola, started traveling abroad. This very famous capoeira teacher, Mr. Moraes, who revitalized capoeira in the 70s. In the 80s, he traveled to Nigeria, for instance, to give a workshop with some of his students. Then he traveled to the US, and it started this connection between culture from the Black Atlantic, we call it. So there was a strong connection with the US, and then some famous mestres migrated to the United States. Mestre Giovine, who lives still in New York, and another Mestre Cobra Mancha, who lived for a while in Washington, D.C. And then he's back in Brazil, but then that's how they started. And then you start seeing different groups everywhere, like other people who were not really mestres, but they decided to migrate as well for economic reasons, and they knew capoeira, and they started opening schools all over the world.
So just like you have in Kung Fu and you have your Sifu and everything, and you have in karate the same kind of thing, you almost like a family tree of like, who did you study under, and then who was your teacher? Is that the same kind of
Yes, it's the same logic. We have in Capoeira Angola, that is the one that I know more. Yes, every teacher has a kind of lineage. It's a kind of lineage, kind of family tree, where you trace your connection to the founding members of Capoeira Angola, and then also to ancestors. Yes, right. And wherever you go, you always say, "Oh, with whom you are training?" You say, "Oh, I train with him or with him," and they know the line. Yeah, you work with a disciple from that. Then we are connected.
Yeah.
But
similar to anthropologists.
Exactly, same thing with anthropology. You can always trace your connection to Franz Boas or to So exactly the same. But also it has grown exponentially now. So a lot of people are losing this control of mentally locate the different lines where you come from. And teachers in Brazil are very worried about that. They are losing control of who is the they call it the caretaker of tradition now. When you get many local mestres to capoeira mestres, teachers, like recognized in Japan, in Mexico, different in the US, in the UK, and they are trying to figure out how to adapt this stuff.
Right. So I mean, a number of questions that my own students have posted really does kind of come down to the question of, if it's a global form, you know, how authentic, I mean, if you even want to use that term, how has it changed in different countries? I mean, is Capoeira Angola in London going to be the same as Capoeira Angola in Mexico City or in New York? How has this movement kind of, and this exponential increase, changed the forms?
Well, it has changed a lot. Probably from kind of like a external, like a position, like very distant position. You might not see them a lot, but yeah, if you know capoeira and you have traveled, like in my case and many other practitioners, yes, you see, well, this doesn't exist. We don't focus about these things in Mexico. No, we pay attention to these other things. And then in other countries, for instance, in France, I was reading an ethnography by one of my colleagues, also de Brito. He's Brazilian, but he made a research about Capoeira Angola groups in France. And he realized that, well, these guys in France are more interested about the spirituality aspect of Capoeira than my Brazilian counterparts. No? So actually, he realized that they were more religiously, spiritually fundamentalist in France than in Brazil. But they wanted to preserve everything like without changes. No? While, for instance, in the UK, because there are also a lot of mestres, a lot of local traditions now in Capoeira, more or less the spiritual part is there, but it's more focused about even the politics of Capoeira, no? About the learning process, about the art, whatever, and then how you combine it with other disciplines, with artistic disciplines. In Mexico, it has blended a lot in Capoeira Angola with local forms of spirituality. For instance, no? Local spirituality.
Well, I'd imagine. I mean, that's really, I mean, the fundamental. This is why I think is a great book to assign to you know, to undergraduates in anthropology or something, because you really do see that, you know, culture is porous, right? Even these things that you think are very ritualized and are static in a way, you know, they have to be. They're played with, they're modified, they undergo transformation because they're living, right? They're living things.
Exactly, and this kind of the territorialized the rituals, they bring this opportunity always to innovate, to create, because you don't have another choice. You don't have a teacher there living in your city for 1 year, 2 years. Sometimes you have that chance, that opportunity, but in reality, you don't have the chance of a constant relationship with that teacher.
Right.
And
so when the teacher,
you have to learn.
Yeah, when the teachers come, I mean, is it kind of do they try to like write the, you know, change, you know, say you're not doing this right? I mean, I'm thinking so much.
All the time. No, all the time they come and tell you, hey, no, that's not how I do things. Why are you innovating in this way? You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. No.
I mean, do they get that criticism, you know, abroad? I remember teaching, you know, in grad school, I taught the Asian classics at the University of Chicago to continuing ed students. And I would have a lot of, you know, yoga practitioners in the class, like yoga teachers. Now, these are people, you know, American yoga is nothing, it has nothing to do with, you know, the Bhagavad Gita and all this stuff. And they're doing like kind of in a way, first they're resistant and then they kind of like blows their mind that, you know.
Oh, yeah. The teachers,
I mean, is it the same kind of thing?
Yes, teachers now are a little bit more tolerant, but before, because they want to negotiate and they also want to get money, you know? So they want to be so orthodox. No? But sometimes they just laugh and say, like, what is this? No, but sometimes they put a stop. They say, like, well, listen, no. The people try to sing in another language. No, they say, no, you have to sing in Portuguese. No, come on. Or, however, they said, no, don't sing in Spanish, don't sing in Greek. No, for instance, I had a friend who created a beautiful song in Greek in Capoeira, but he could never play it because nobody allowed him to do that.
Oh, wow.
But if you want to sing in Yoruba, oh yes, welcome. No, you sing as much as you can. No? So it's very selective about which changes you are allowed to introduce. And mestres actually sometimes becoming more aware of this kind of spiritual background of Afro-Brazilian religions when they go abroad, because it's a way of differentiating them with other practitioners that are also as good as them in bodily movements. But this kind of spiritual knowledge, they don't have it, so only the teachers. No? So this is a way of differentiating themselves from the rest. some of them, they try to keep control about what to do, what not to do. Other teachers are more open and say, well, listen, just go and do your thing. Just don't modify these things because it's too much. No, it stops being Capoeira Angola.
So the other question then, is in 2014, you get this big shift. UNESCO declares, Capoeira Intangible Cultural Heritage. And
Yes.
of course, we can't really go into what this means, but basically you're talking about it as World Heritage now. So it's saying that this is, something that is of universal value and that should be recognized. And with these kinds of UNESCO designations, because it's such a long and ritualized process itself, in a way, it's often accused of museumifying, or making more static a particular form. Is that what happened with Capoeira? Is that why they designated it? There's a lot of questions here.
It's a big topic, Michael. What I can tell you this is, it started everything with the recognition of Capoeira's intangible cultural heritage in Brazil by the Institute of Patrimonio Artístico Humanístico.
Yes, because first it is a national thing.
Brazil, national thing.
State has to put it on the register.
And in that national recognition, the role of the teacher and the Capoeira Angola became kind of like national cultural heritage. Later in 2014, the UNESCO recognition brought again the issue like, well, this is an international status given by an international organization, most prestigious one, that declared the God of Capoeira as part of the intangible cultural heritage of Brazil, but also the role of the Mestre of Capoeira. So when they do that, the Mestre said, oh, finally, we got an official recognition of our work and as a role as a kind of caretakers of traditions in Brazil. And this brought a lot of changes because suddenly politicians, governmental agencies, non-governmental agencies got into this kind of public talk about the role of Capoeira now in society, about different projects, about different access to funding, about all this kind of work, for instance, on the preservation of memory, for instance, and slavery and all this stuff. So they had a lot of projects and they had a lot of positive initiative as well. I remember I was helping also some of colleagues who were involved into this kind of national initiatives to give some kind of pension to all teachers from all style of Capoeira. And it was a very nice project to try to give to those recognized by the community as teachers, to give them a pension. The problem is like, which were going to be the criteria to recognize who's a real master from somebody who just wants to get money, and it became a mess. So it wasn't equal distributed, but some teachers got the chance to get this kind of pensions.
So the master were, for the most part, were supportive of the process of designation.
From some types of Capoeira, yes. Capoeira Angola, some of them, they participated, but they felt excluded because they didn't take them into account. And also because they had a lot of problems and disputes with the other teachers who organized this kind of like all the paperwork for the UNESCO recognition, and they felt excluded. No? And definitely, it was just later, some years later, that they started seeing the benefits from being part of this kind of UNESCO recognition, in the sense of giving an importance to the role of a mestre, to introduce Capoeira more officially in schools, in primary schools, secondary schools, to have official a Capoeira course, for instance, in your primary school, as a physical activity. So,
this is a great thing. I want to just pause and also just address also my cultural heritage students, because this is a great case study, that the 2014 intangible heritage designation in general, because one of the things that differs between the original UNESCO World Heritage designation, which are about places, right? And that was my first book, actually, with Lexington Books as well, is that it was about these monuments, and it still is about these monuments and these things, right? These tangible things, and UNESCO had great difficulty expanding out of their criteria to deal with cultures that don't produce big things, But so with the Intangible Heritage Convention 2003, what changed was that shifted the focus from the things to the people themselves, to the practitioners themselves. And I think that's what's really great. You see this recognition even in Brazil, where they're now not only recognizing the practitioners in a way that, now it's not about gang related things, but it's about raising the status, the international status. You're even offering pensions as teachers, which you didn't have before. I mean, that's incredible.
Yes, it's some of the change that is happening. So it became a kind of public policy topic really in recent years. I have some colleagues, they're sociologists and historians, who are really into this kind of helping developing projects to support the teachers, for instance, teachers who are like old, and they cannot train, for instance, they cannot teach, they can only play music, so it's good because most of capoeira teachers, at least in the past, they died in poverty, even the founders of Capoeira Angola and Capoeira Regional, they died poor in extreme poverty.
This was a street practice. Exactly. I mean, you said practicing in your garage, your oily garage, I would imagine it's more of a informal economy kind of a thing, right? You're paying a practitioner kind of under the table.
In some groups, however, this is kind of typical of Capoeira Angola. It has never been that successful in bringing a lot of students to an academy. You get maximum 20. If you have 20 students in your academy, you are successful. But in other styles, there are capoeira enterprises, really. Enterprises. We have a group of Capoeira Abadá, that is a worldwide capoeira association led by Mestre Camisa, a disciple from Mestre Bimba, old guy now. And he used to have like classes in Copacabana Beach with thousands of students. He's in a kind of a stage and with a microphone and teaching and giving his lessons. And with groups all over the world, and his academy is like hundreds of people. So some teachers, they got really rich with capoeira, and also teachers based in the US, at least in some way.
And I think that this is really also one of the main focuses of your book, obviously, is this notion of capoeira tourism, right? So the people who are studying and have learned it abroad, not in Brazil, but want not only to travel there, you could almost think of it as business travel, but the people take what, Lauren Miller Griffith says, calls apprenticeship pilgrimage. You're traveling there to apprentice with somebody else. Can you talk a little bit about the tourism or the pilgrimage or the differences?
Course, this excellent concept that Lauren Griffith develops with the apprenticeship pilgrimage definitely resonates with the way capoeira practitioners travel and move around the world. And her ethnography, her work is amazing because it really illuminates all these kind of issues that nobody had systematized before in that brilliant way. So how practitioners travel to Brazil as a kind of pilgrimage, but it's not a religious pilgrimage all the time. It had this apprenticeship pilgrimage. You want to learn, and if you have the means, then you go to another city where a very famous is traveling, or to Brazil or to another country just to find this expertise and to learn more, because later you can benefit from that and you can improve your skills. You can get, for example, more students, you can learn more about it. But at the same time that you have these practitioners like apprentice pilgrimage going to different parts, you at the same time, simultaneously, before the pandemic as well, you got the teachers also traveling all the world. So it's a kind of like always two ways of encounters, from one side is students who want to learn and do this pilgrimage, and teachers whose mission is to become missionaries. They said, I am a missionary. I said in the book, I am a cultural traditional missionary. My role in life now is to spread the capoeira word around the world.
Do you think that has benefited capoeira? I mean, both the intangible heritage and the tourism pilgrimage nexus.
But definitely, it has helped a lot. It has helped a lot of teachers to bring some income from their travels abroad, so they can, for instance, they live in Brazil. If they just practice and teach capoeira in Brazil, it's difficult to make a living from Capoeira Angola in Salvador, and in Rio de Janeiro. So international travel is the way to get money, but also to spread the word, they say, to show them what is this capoeira tradition. And there is a lot of eager people they're willing to learn, to listen to them. And also they travel a lot in Brazil, particularly the famous mestres. But not all mestres can travel. Not all practitioners, students abroad, they can travel. No? In Mexico, it's difficult sometimes to travel to Brazil constantly because of the economic situation. No? And also, mestres, they don't travel so often to Mexico nowadays, also because economic incentives. No, they're not the same amount of money that they can earn here that if they go to the UK, for instance.
And so I guess when things are opening up from the pandemic, it's going to be similar destinations again, I guess, because, you know, fortunately, the wealthier countries are the ones that are going to be vaccinated earlier and can travel more.
Exactly. And I don't know if it's true, but from what I've heard is that some leaders, some even practitioners, advanced practitioners, they are also willing to travel more now and to probably stay away from Brazil for a while, no? Because of the situation, because of the political regime that is now there. So it's also not everybody's happy with that.
Right. So that, I did want to ask about that. I mean, you know, we're getting really horror stories from, you know, from Brazil. How has the pandemic affected all of this? Well, I mean, both the capoeira practices in Brazil with the mestres, but also abroad.
Well, it's been terrible. I have a very good friend of mine, Ricardo, no? And we are co-editing a book about capoeira, no? in Spanish. No? Well, I'm translating everything. No? And then suddenly I lost contact with him for like some months, whatever. No? And then I sent him a WhatsApp. No, Ricardo, how's it going? Everything is fine. You haven't replied to anything I sent you. No? And then he told me, well, I was in the hospital. No, I got COVID and I was in the hospital with oxygen. I was really bad. And he's kind of fit. He's under 50 years old, but he's a person who's been training capoeira forever. No, he's very fit. He's in very good shape. But he told me, no, he lives in Recife. No, he told me in Recife I was knocked down. No? And that was last year, around this time last year. Then I chatted with him a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that he got COVID again. No? And this time also, it wasn't that bad, but it's okay. No? And then common friends or common people that we know in capoeira, they have died from COVID. No? So basically it has impacted the whole Brazilian, the capoeira community in Brazil, no? That people who more or less we know that had suffered and they had died.
So, you know, it's just terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, you know, one of the things that we've been trying to adjust to, you know, in lockdowns and in the pandemic, even in tourism and study abroad as well, is the notion of kind of like using this kind of feature, right? Zoom and other online features to still bring you know, what the academic world would call like student learning outcomes, you know, like to still address these outcomes, but virtually. Has that been able to happen, you know, in your field sites?
Yes. Capoeira moved into the online life, you know, like classes, workshops via Zoom. And also a lot of talks and interviews, as I mentioned before the talk, that famous maestros who rarely gave interviews suddenly appear in Facebook Lives talking for 4 or 5 hours. Like it's like kind of like really oral history in the making. No?
Yeah.
And they say, the organizers, we leave all these interviews, we won't delete them as far as we can. We will keep them here so people can use them for their own research. No? And they've invited a lot of people. And maestros who rarely talked before suddenly started talking about their lives, no, life history, about the situation, how they're dealing with the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. A lot of classes, a lot of lessons online with famous teachers that had never happened before from your home. No? You can teach with a very famous teacher from your home, but with a kind of like you just pay a small contribution, no? Like not insane, so it's a good money. Yeah, you pay $10, you can get a good class with a very important teacher online, and they try to teach as much as they can, to try to show, you know, what they can do online. Music lessons online as well.
I mean, those things, my kids take music lessons online. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you know, one of the nice things about this is we can reach different audience. I mean, you know, we can have you zoom in from Mexico to talk to our students in a way that it would not be as easy to do non-virtual.
Because we were not used to do all these things. The infrastructures probably were not really prepared, no, to have this kind of stuff, no, and definitely it's going to bring a lot of changes. And in capoeira, the big discussion now is like when this passes, the teachers, what is going to be their role now in capoeira, no, with all this information now online? Are they going to continue traveling? Are they going to use virtual forums. And this is the big question, no? And probably in other areas too. No? But in Capoeira also has created a lot of solidarity among communities, among groups as well. Like in Mexico, I know groups that try to have some kind of like lessons in the streets, to have some bodas, sometimes to bring people slowly together. No, now that vaccinations are rolling out in Mexico, no, so step by step, no, it's coming, no? But yeah, it's difficult. No?
Well, we hope for the best.
Yeah.
So we are about 45-minute mark. I want to ask one other bigger question, but I do want to say, I know some people have to go, but please do use the Q&A down below if you have any questions. We'd love to have you join the conversation in about 5 minutes or so. So please do post that so that I know who wants to ask a question. But for me, I think studying capoeira and this book and reading this book is really a great instructive monograph as well, to teach, undergrads and graduates about how to do field work. I mean, we often say the thing that differentiates anthropological field work from other forms, given surveys and doing quantitative research, is that embodiment, right? And this is a great example. I mean, you have to do the movements, you have to play the music, you have the sound, you have the feeling, you have all this stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how you how you went about doing the field work here?
Yeah, Michael, the issue with field work is very important in this kind of bodily practice like capoeira, because really the only way to learn is by practice. Now you need to become a capoeira practitioner, and then you realize that you have to train, you have to learn, you have to overcome a lot of, we call it frictions and resistance from your own body to learn new movements, to really get adjusted to capoeira. And this thing, this adjustment takes years. No, it's not like something in 6 months you will know everything. No, it takes years of practice to more or less mold your body as a capoeira practitioner. I remember before I started capoeira, I was very skinny. I was like very skinny. Then I started to practice capoeira.
You're still skinny. You didn't
skinny. Not that much, but I was terribly skinny. But then with capoeira, you could see that your body started changing slowly, but you can see you could do things, you have more strength, you could do this, you feel more comfortable in yourself, you get more confidence in what you were doing. And when I was talking with teachers about this, well, I'm feeling this, like that, they told me, well, because you are learning capoeira, and this is how you learn. You feel this in your body, and that's how you become, like, your body transforms, you transform also capoeira by way of practicing, and then it becomes a kind of like, it's a kind of, there is reciprocity in this relationship. No, you give capoeira, your sweat, your painful, horrible classes. Sometimes it's very demanding. No, Capoeira Angola is very demanding. All types of capoeira, physically demanding. And then capoeira pays you back. No, they give you things as well. No, they give you the opportunity to do this, to meet people. I met my wife through capoeira. She's Kasia, you know her. She was
also international. I mean, she's
international. She's from Poland. No? From Poland. No? She's Polish, and we met through capoeira. No? And then capoeira has given me a lot of stuff. I did my PhD on capoeira before I was a practitioner. Then I did my PhD in when I was living abroad, for instance. Well, ways to support myself was through playing capoeira. No, having a group, having this, and so it has brought me a lot of things, but I started in 2000, and then, well, more or less we continue. I practice at home. Now I don't have a group, but for many years, me and other friends, we used to have groups. Even in Mexico, when I arrived in San Luis Potosí, I had a group, capoeira group, for 4.5 years. We had a capoeira group here, solely with the students, and it was really, really good experience. No? Then I stopped because my daughter Natasha was born, and then it was very difficult.
Everything changes.
Everything changes, no? And then we changed some policies as well of interaction with the students, whatever. But then we used to have a group, very solid group. And some of my ex-students always ask me, when are you going to continue teaching, whatever? Soon, when the pandemic's over, I promised myself that I will open again a capoeira group here. Also, it's very demanding. But anyway, this long-term fieldwork gives you a different insight about the practice and the changes of people that you knew capoeira from the past, what they are doing now. And basically what I want to write, I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking about it. Next chapter, probably an article, it will be about stories about capoeira practitioners who decided to stop. People who've been training for 20 years. I know that. I have like 5, 6, 7 cases of famous capoeira, not maestros, but practitioners committed, dedicated their lives, and suddenly, what's going on? Nah, capoeira is over. Why? And they tell you the stories why they stopped capoeira. No? So it's
I
also
wonder, that would be really fascinating.
really fascinating. And I haven't heard any stories about this capoeira who decided to quit, no? After a long time, no? Like quit for good, no?
For
They
good.
stop the groups, whatever, no?
I'd love to know. You know any reasons why, or?
Well, sometimes problems with their teachers. Most of the time, it's problems with their teachers.
Yeah.
That appear a little bit in the book, no? In the master-student relationship. Yeah, problem with their teachers. Some others because things that they don't like in capoeira anymore. Things becoming more like kind of like orthodox, no? For instance, in some very intolerant in some places, and some people because they are doing other things in their lives. No? Capoeira is fun, is whatever, is funny to do. It's something that gives them a lot of pleasure, but they don't get any money from this, no?
So then they don't get any money.
They get money. Then how are we going to continue? No? I train at home. No, they said.
Yeah,
they cannot continue. No,
so sorry.
No,
because we have some questions, but I wanted to bring one other thing before we ask the question, just to follow up, because this is really, really fascinating about the fact that your body changes, right?
Yeah.
There's a performative aspect to doing ethnography, doing anthropological research, right? You have to perform to build trust. You have to show that you're really into it. I mean, I remember doing, my research on Padre Pio, who's from my grandfather's hometown, this Catholic saint. I was on pilgrimages. People are like, oh, here's your rosary. You're, praying along with them. And that was a way, I mean, regardless of whatever my own religious beliefs are, that was a way of really building this trust, this connection with people. Did you see that any mestre or people that you were trying to interview, were they looking at you up and down and being like, all right, he looks like he has the right form. I'll talk to him because he's legit. He's not, just this outsider trying to ask questions.
Well, in the beginning, no. In the beginning, they don't know you, and you start asking questions, and they tell you their standard answer to get rid of you, no? Capoeira is this, I do it because I said, wow, amazing. I already know all this from the first interview.
The book.
But that's not true. That's not true from the book. No, you get to know things after long time training, no? And also when people start talking about you, they say, well, this guy is serious. He's really trying to learn, whatever, no? And the teachers appreciate when they see that you try to learn, and they really and they open themselves to talk more freely to you, and they see you performing in the rodas, and they say, well, you're doing better, no? You are not completely wasted, no? And they start trusting you, and then with daily interaction, you get to know these people. But it takes years to build a rapport with the masters of capoeira. Definitely, it takes years. It has taken me many years, but some of them, they became my friends, no? So they're friends that I don't see them exclusively as teachers, but also as friends, that we have helped each other. I have helped them to come to Mexico in some way, to go to London, for instance, to host them, to pay for a workshop so they can come to San Luis, for instance. I brought a famous master in 2012 to teach for 5 days here, right? And from this kind of experiences you learn, and they also appreciate that, And then some of them they have read my stuff in that I have written in Spanish, for instance, in English, still not widely read in Brazil, but some of them they have written reviews about my books, so people get to know my books there, and hopefully soon they will be translated into Portuguese, because some of them, people from the publisher, they told me, well, we should get in touch to try to translate at least one of your books into Portuguese, because there is a market here. People want to learn and want to know more. I'm in constant contact with capoeira specialists in Brazil, in the United States, all over the place, because it's a very small group of researchers. It's not like very big who study capoeira, but now they're coming more and more new researchers studying capoeira in Brazil, for instance, that I know. And I've been invited to different committees, for thesis, masters, PhD dissertations, and it's interesting all the things that they're doing in Brazil now. And now with this new status of capoeira as a material cultural heritage from UNESCO recognition, this is bringing a lot of more status on. More people are taking seriously academic research on capoeira. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question about that from Katie Buckley. Katie, I'm going to pull you up in a second. But before that, I wanted to go back again to talking about the field work. Yes. Madison had a really good question for you. You want to ask the question, Maddie?
Hi, Madeline.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello.
I was wondering, so in the US right now, we've been kind of having this cultural reset where people are calling into question issues of race and having white people participating in things that maybe they shouldn't be participating in. And I was wondering like what the ethics are of having white people participate in capoeira, even though it's something that was derived out of slavery and it's not necessarily something that's a part of white culture. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Madison. Yeah, in Brazil, I can tell you that before the 2015, something like that in Brazil, from what I know, it was very open. It's been always very open in Brazil. No, you don't need to be black, for instance, to train capoeira. And it's very democratic. It's open to everybody. A lot of mestres, a lot of teachers, they are not black, no? Particularly in the south of Brazil. In the north, most of them they are black, but in the south, no. However, I think derived from all the international issues about black culture, for instance, and the problem of race in Brazil, a lot of groups in the south of Brazil, particularly in the south, they started taking more seriously the issue of race. And some groups and some rodas started banning people who are not Afro-Brazilians, for instance. No? And this is causing a lot of trouble because a lot of traditional players who were not black felt excluded. And they said, what's going on here? This has never happened before. It was very inclusive. Then later, some friends started making some research. And some of these kind of ideological discourses now about race in Brazil, they are coming from people who actually never trained capoeira. They tried to impose them. They came to the rodas with flyers and different things saying like, well, listen, this has to be just exclusive for us, whatever. No? And it's creating a lot of troubles. However, in Salvador, it's not that bad because even though this is a city that is 90% Afro-Brazilian or from African heritage, is very open and tolerant to any kind of people because of tourism and because also now a long tradition of non-black practitioners being part of the tradition for a long, long time. No? So, but yeah, it's becoming in some groups in the south of Brazil, from what I know, in Rio de Janeiro, they started banning people who are not black. That goes against the ethos of capoeira, of inclusivity, no? But yes.
Right. Follow up, though, we were chatting before this started about the fact that, you're not black, you're not Brazilian, you're not of Portuguese origin. How difficult was it to do the field work? I mean, that's another aspect of trust, right?
Yeah. That's a big issue. I can say that at least in this context of capoeira, it helped me a lot that I wasn't white. No? It helped me a lot because at least in Brazil during my field work and also in London, whatever, if I didn't speak, people would think that I was Brazilian. No, they didn't give a damn. No? When they saw me talking, whatever, said, "Well, from where are you from? From Portugal? Are you from the south of Brazil? Where are you from?" Yeah. I'm from Mexico. Then they felt a little bit disillusioned. They felt a little disappointed. Well, from Mexico. But then, Mexico. Well, you're not Brazilian, but you're from Mexico. And they start saying, well, you are like us. You are suffering the same things that we do in Brazil. No, you know how difficult is life in our countries. No, I had a friend who came to me, together with me, to Brazil to do fieldwork about something else, not about capoeira, but he was a very good capoeira practitioner. He was African-American from Philadelphia, actually. And he wasn't treated the same way than me because they said, well, you are black, you understand a lot of issues, but you are not Brazilian, you are American, no? You live in another world. No? In their imaginary life in the US is very different. No? So it made a kind of difference. No? In London, I can tell you this story, for instance, to Madison, is that I was training capoeira. I rarely spoke Spanish because either English or Portuguese because of the context, because of academic context, whatever. So I rarely spoke Spanish. No? So I was with my friends teaching capoeira in our group, but it was always Portuguese and English. And then people assumed that I was kind of somewhere, but they never thought that I was Mexican until I told them, well, listen, I'm Mexican. So yeah, definitely it makes an impact because even though that I am Mexican, they see a difference, of course. No? And if I decided to become initiated in this kind of hierarchy that I always rejected, I would get into some kind of issues with the leader, precisely because I'm not Brazilian. I would have to do more stuff, or the problem with legitimization is always difficult. However, because I know these people for many long time, and capoeiristas, whatever, they're more or less accepted, I could say that, and they, yeah, I feel always welcome among most of capoeira groups, you know. But
That's good.
But yeah, it's very strange situation, because also I talk about something that is not about my culture, not about Mexico, and then most of my publications are in Spanish, but also in English. No, my books are in English, no, because nobody in the Spanish-speaking world feel like interested to publish some stuff about Brazilian stuff. No? In Brazil, probably, but then I don't feel with the expertise to write a book in Portuguese, no, from scratch. No? So it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
More difficult than in English for me, no, because very similar Spanish and Portuguese.
But that brings up another ethical issue, building on what Madison asked, which is, this is a secretive kind of a thing. This is about knowledge that's learned, on habitus, right? The embodied knowledge that's passed down in proper channels. And now you're going off and publishing books on it. I mean, what were some of the ethical aspects of writing? What did you do about that?
Well, I always consult with my friends. No, well, listen, can I write about this, or do you think that is too much? I shouldn't include. Sometimes they tell me, I'll tell you this, but please don't put it in your book. Don't publish it, no, because it's very sensitive, and then it's going to create a lot of troubles here, no. So if you don't mention like the conflicts, what happened really, because then people will get to know, and then I will get into trouble here with everybody, no. From that part, yes, I am very respectful. I always ask them, what can I write or what I cannot write about, and ask for their authorization. Well, listen, do you think I'm writing about this? It's good. Here is important to say that a lot of capoeira teachers, they are also academics, no? They are professors at university. So it's very easy to chat with them and have a dialogue. Hey, teacher, I'm writing this about it. What do you think? Does it make sense? Or I shouldn't do this? Or what do we do? No? So it's a very kind of horizontal dialogue with these capoeira teachers, because they are also academics. So it's an advantage. In other cases, yes, I know a lot of things they couldn't appear in the book. A lot of things, for instance, about violence. I cannot get into that, because then it's really talking bad about people. But
right.
The book is difficult. I will get a lot of compromises if I start talking about it.
But I think that's really important. I mean, and especially when you're dealing with like urban anthropology, urban studies, often that's a practice, right? To be able to consult, to show your work, to talk and say, this is what I'm going to be talking about. What you said, I think is a highly ethical practice. It's a very good practice to have when you're doing this kind of work.
And even though you ask for permission for this and that, sometimes they forget and they started telling you, hey, why did you do that? Why did you do that? For instance, the cover of the book, that is Mr. Bocadurio, no? For instance, Bocadurio. I gave one of the copies to one of his students in Mexico, no? He's a very good friend, whatever. So, and then Boca texts me, this Mexican student told me, well, Boca is kind of angry. Why? Because he's in the cover and you didn't ask him for authorization. Of course, yes, I did that. Of course, yes. So I text him, Boca, here is the cover of the book, whatever. But just remember, we agree with that. No, you told me that it was okay, and actually you were very happy. And told me, it's okay, no problem. I just forgot about it. No, but then his student got the idea. I just took the photo.
Yeah, maybe he said something. You never know with that.
You never know what happened. No, but anyway, these kind of issues are all the time there. No, coming capoeira, but yes, it's interesting.
Okay, so we got two good questions coming up here, Katie. We'll start with you. You come from a tourism practitioner standpoint as well as one of my students. Katie, are you still there? You want to ask your question about heritage?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you very much. So in your book, when you're talking about the leaders and how they travel the world to teach Capoeira, I know I'm not pronouncing it properly. I'm sorry.
Capoeira.
Capoeira. So you said that sometimes they deploy different strategies because they are addressing different types of people who have different interests in Capoeira. Yeah. So maybe they alter the way that they teach it according to who their audience is.
Yeah.
So I was, I know that there's a spiritual aspect as well, and I'm just wondering if the leaders have kind of a responsibility to uphold the character by working to present it as only the truly authentic versions.
Mhm. Yes, there is a whole performance about teaching. It's very different to see a teacher teaching in Brazil with people who more or less know the background of capoeira, the story, the Afro-Brazilian spirituality and religion that is involved. So the teacher actually takes this for granted and kind of just does his stuff. No? But when you see the same teacher teaching abroad, he changes completely. Like he even changed the way of his demanding things from people. No? He becomes more relaxed. He becomes more open, more kind of like easygoing. Talks about these spiritual things. Keep talking and talking about the importance of learning the true way of being capoeirista. He really talking like a missionary, like he really wanted to be. And he very super easygoing. But you see him in Brazil, and in Brazil it's like a no way. It's like a like a sergeant in a military, like super strict. Like,
do you think that it's to appeal to them to more, or do you think it's, I have a great colleague in Perugia who talks about the fact that when she brings American study abroad students to chefs, who take these food classes, they change the way that they talk because they kind of regard these American students as like, you don't know what food really is, and good food is and stuff. So we're going to dumb it down and lower the bar. And we know that you're never going to go back and cook, this great food anyway.
Why they change so much abroad? Sometimes because the students demand from them to change. No, they told them, well, listen, guys, you are not in Brazil. Right. Here is different. We paid for this, and you have to teach. You cannot spend 3 hours just talking, no? Because some teachers, they just came. Also, though, they came and they said that they tried to take advantage. They just talk for a long time. They showed some basic movements, and that's all. I took my dollars or my euros and goodbye, no? So groups are starting really demanding knowledge. We pay you, and it's like a business, no? Business type, no? Particularly with masters who are not related to the group. Mm-hmm. If they're groups, the relationship is similar to the Brazilian case, no? But if they are just passing by, no, in a different group, they treat them like business. It's a way to keep them, no? And sometimes they have to lower the standards of demands and exigency because they go into trouble with people, no, who demanded them to calm down, no, and particularly now there's a very, very delicate issue with gender, no, the problem of how women are treated in capoeira circles, no, and a lot of female capoeira academics and practitioners, they've been speaking out about the way they are treated by male teachers, male practitioners, and they created a whole new movement about how capoeira should be equal, and be respectful with no violence, for instance. No, but it's something that is kind of new. It had like 2 or 3 years in Brazil, particularly, but in the US and in Europe, it's been there for a while now because there were discussions that were already happening before, no? But in Brazil, and then the masters had to adapt themselves when they travel. They were trying to be easygoing, but also trying to be kind of very responsible with what they do. No, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, are there no female mestre?
Yeah, yes, there are a lot. Yes, there are plenty of female mestres in Brazil and in different places. No, yes, definitely. Yeah, and some of my female friends, they have written now. They just recently published a book about the importance of female capoeiristas in history, but also in the reconfiguration of tradition. No? And actually, in the new book that I'm co-editing with my friend Ricardo, one section is just about capoeira and the issue of gender, no, the problem with gender in capoeira.
Yeah, that's
and we put like 3 or 4 feminist anthropologists talking about, who are also capoeira teachers, no, and they talk about this, no. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. So, and we could we'll leave it at that. But I mean, that's an incredibly important discussion. Also, do they travel? I'll ask one more gender question. I want Dennis. He had great questions to ask. do they travel as well? I mean, tourism actually favors, it's one of the only real businesses that kind of favor female gender. There are more women employed in the tourism sector for lots of reasons, hospitality reasons. But I would, how does that breakdown go with Nestor that travel? And
yes, women and men, they travel equally. Like the famous capoeira teachers, female teachers, I've seen them also everywhere, in London, in Mexico, different places they come and travel. Yes. But yeah, I have to say that I have seen more female capoeira teachers in other styles than in Capoeira Angola.
Okay.
Been more inclusive, actually, I think so. The role of women in other styles of capoeira than in Capoeira Angola, because Capoeira Angola, they always tell you, no, you have to follow tradition, you have to follow the way it has always been trained or whatever, but it's always a male-centered way of doing things. No, that's why you get these conflicts. No?
That's fascinating. So Dennis, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Sergio. Hello, Michael. Greetings from Australia. It's 1 a.m. over here.
Oh my goodness. Thanks for staying up.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to hear you talk, and I really enjoyed your book. I reviewed it for Tourism Geography journal, and it inspired me to also try to write about my experiences of capoeira and travel, even though I'm kind of
you got a book series if you want to.
Okay. Yeah, and I have a couple of questions. One is whether you know about the current initiatives to support people who relied on tourists in Salvador de Bahia, because many, especially young people, were part of performing groups or even street artists that relied on tourists, on income from tourists. And so I heard the stories of their hardships now. Do you know what's happening to them? And the second question is related to a movement towards sports capoeira. So even capoeira contemporánea apparently is now not sports enough, and some people suggest we need to make it like a formal sport. And recently World Capoeira Federation was organized that currently they do some online competitions, but also they did some offline previously before the pandemic. And there seems to be this movement towards trying to get capoeira into the Olympics. I think the recent inclusion of breakdance also provides this kind of motivation for people to try to include capoeira as an Olympic sport.
Well, yeah, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, the first question, yes, I can tell you that. Well, I can imagine, because I haven't talked about this issue about what happened with all the tourist industry, with all the impact of non-tourism in Salvador. No, particularly in the center, that is a city also that lives from tourism. No, like really is the main source, one of the main sources of income. No? And with the devastation of the pandemic, definitely there has been a lot of troubles. No? A lot of troubles, and I don't know if they are. Well, what I know is that some capoeira teachers, they don't get any support. No, they don't support the academies or nothing at all. I don't know if there is some kind of infrastructure projects to support people engaged with tourism and the tourism industry in Salvador. By analogy, if we compare to Mexico, to the Mexican case, that could be similar, I could tell you that probably there is no support at all that is happening here. Like here in Mexico, they just try to not close everything, like in Brazil, precisely because there is no support. They try to keep things more or less open, yes, with all the kind of social distance measures, with using a face mask and all this stuff, but we couldn't shut down the economy, no? And it's more or less open, but what we have is just like, at least not in the Caribbean, things look like normal actually, but in Cancun, no, for instance, no? But in other areas in Mexico, the tour is more like local tourism, no? More like national tourism, but it's happening because there are not so many restrictions. But people from abroad, they are even banned to come to Mexico, and I think it's happening in Brazil now even more, no, because of the pandemic and the disaster of the policies there. So I expect that there is no help whatsoever to people there. No? About the other thing, yes, I think now with time I'm seeing a diversion of capoeira. One capoeira keeping this traditional path, and another capoeira diverging to this kind of sportive context, definitely. I see more and more distance, less dialogue between these two types of initiatives. More radicalization from the traditional capoeira style, for instance, a little bit Capoeira Angola, more radicalized a little bit more, because they are also being influenced by all these Afro-Brazilian discourse, political discourses about race now. And on the other side, on the other hand, you have this sportive capoeira that is focusing exclusively on competition, about dexterity, ability, and to become really what they tried to do in the 30s, a national Brazilian martial art, in the same way that jiu-jitsu is following that path. And of course, you will find a lot of confrontation. It's really interesting to see how this becomes a kind of confrontational disputes between capoeira going all the way to the sportive arena and trying to get into the Olympics, even tournaments. There are a lot of tournaments of capoeira. Even in the book I mentioned a bit about the Red Bull Paranauê that caused some like an outreach in the Capoeira Angola community. Although some Capoeira Angola practitioners participated in the Red Bull Paranauê because they got some money. So you get this kind of truth, but two initiatives. But what I think is like in the short and medium term, you will see this divergent capoeira on the sportive side and the traditional side. And who knows what is going to happen there in the middle. It's probably these contemporary groups, but more focused on the artistic side of capoeira. But yeah, the sportive side of capoeira is growing a lot, definitely. And well, Dennis, thank you very much, Dennis, for your great review of my book. It's good to meet you at least virtually, and for your kind words in the review. Thank you, Dennis.
And are you a practitioner too? Do you practice capoeira?
Yeah, so I was practicing in Hong Kong, in China, with Mestre Chumbinho, who is Mestre from Australia. And we're in a group Capoeira Brazil, which was formed by 3 guys in Rio de Janeiro. And they used to be 3 friends, and now one friend is kind of following his own path, even though he keeps the same name. And I went to Rio de Janeiro and I ended up with the wrong mestre. And I didn't know all the internal politics. So yeah, a lot of these themes that you mentioned in the book, Sergio, is really what I have experienced, even though I've been only practicing for about 5 years.
Okay. Oh, good. That's excellent. Yeah. You have
and
to get your research out.
If you see Mestre Cigano from Longe do Mar.
Oh yeah, of course, yes.
Mexico
Very good
City,
friend of mine.
very
hello. Good friend of mine, yes. Yeah, I'll probably meet him online. I'm very in touch with him. He's a really good guy. Cigano, yeah. Thanks, Dennis.
Well, that's great. And I mean, we're over an hour, so we probably should finish. This is really great.
Keep talking,
we couldn't do the promised demonstration or anything. We don't have.
I don't have instruments there in my office, and the space where I'm here is I will have to clean a lot. You don't see what is around.
No, it's just like
a lot of my daughter's stuff, like different things, toys, a lot of stuff.
So we'll have to do another one, and maybe we can post a video or something on the web, on your book's web page.
But before I forget about this long-term program, I would like to show you very quick. I never show them, but I will show some photos that I
show us some photos
for my fieldwork. Let me see how. Wait a second. Excuse me. Let me check.
Yeah, and certainly if we have some videos or anything, we could always post it to your book's webpage. This recording will be on the webpage.
Okay. Yeah, I will give my. But I wish I just few photos.
Yep. Here we go.
Well, here we go. Let me see. This was a photo. Let me just move this. That. Can you see that? Yes. No?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That was when I even had hair here.
That's your hair.
Capoeira.
I didn't recognize that.
That's when I started capoeira. 2000, 2001. I don't remember. A long time ago.
And there's a mix of men and women.
Men and women. Yeah, my friend Mariana, different place. It was when I started training with this Brazilian Mestre Pedrinho. I trained for 2.5 years, and this is Mexico City. Then this is from Brazil with Mr. Bigodinho. He was such a kind man. Really, he was really a wise man. Bigodinho. At the time, he was very old. He didn't play any capoeira, but he was a really good singer. He recorded like a couple of CDs with music, really lovely music that he performed. He was a very good friend of mine because I met him all the time in the rodas of capoeira. He was everywhere. Bigodinho, the thing is with Bigodinho is like, he was always drunk, no? He liked to drink a lot. So he arrived to the rodas like drunk, no? But always inspired to play music, to talk a lot about his life, whatever. So this is in an event with him in 2005, I guess, with Bigodinho. He died in the 2011, 2012, he died. He was very old. No? But Bigodinho is a really good friend of mine. I had a lot of interviews with him. Some of my material that I have interviewed with him, I haven't really processed to write something about him, but it's something that I still have to write about. No? And this is with Mr. Bocadurrio in London. The first time he came to London in 2007, I invited him because he really traveled to other places, now to Brazil. So I told him, well, you have to come now. You are an excellent master. You are a really professional. So come. So we managed to bring him to London. It was the first time he came to London. It's me playing the berimbau and Bocadurrio when he still had dreadlocks. Now he doesn't have hair. So he cut his dreadlocks in 2007. And this is when in 2020, the same guy, Mr. Bocadurrio here with a hat in Mexico City, because then he opened a group in Mexico City. He always asks me, Sergio, you need to open a group in Mexico, whatever. I talk about, I wish, but I'm super busy, and the commitment, I know the commitment of opening a group. I told him so far it's very difficult. But he opened a group in Jalapa, in Veracruz, and he's doing one of his visits in Mexico City in 2017. So I am here down there in the same space where I trained capoeira here in 2000. No? So it's the same space, but with other people, no? And so it's this kind of the meaning, no? A little bit of doing long-term fieldwork, no? You doing capoeira in different stages of your life with people who are still there, who disappear, who come back, people who died, no? Like these mestres. So it involves a kind of understanding this idea of way of life, no? Capoeira is a way of life that these old masters always talk about, no? And it's fascinating, no? I'm having a lot of fun, no? This fieldwork it's been kind of like a pleasure, no? To follow and to do research in these kind of topics about ritual and religion, no? So as you must know, no? Because also your topic of research is also fascinating.
I mean, I think that's really, that's the key. I always tell people you got to do a job that you love, and exactly. Especially when you're picking a field site, you need to do something that you really love. And it's great also just to talk with you and with others, who have published in the series, in these webinars. I mean, to hear the things that they really are so different, but things that they really were passionate about that become their way of life.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, this becomes part of you when you do field work. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you again. The book,
I
mentioned in the beginning, is Capoeira Mobility and Tourism, Preserving an Afro-Brazilian Tradition in a Globalized World. It's Sergio Gonzalez Varela. This is going to be the last webinar for the academic year of 2020, 2021. Hopefully we'll have a better academic year next year in general, post-pandemic. And I know in the fall, we're gonna have a number of other webinars with Lauren. So we're gonna hear about apprenticeship pilgrimage in Capoeira, so we can compare these two webinars. We'll do my own. My book was just published, Study Abroad and the Quest for an Anti-Tourism Experience. So we'll have that discussed. I'll be talking to myself, I guess now. And also Natalia Block will be talking about her book that's coming out as well in India. So stick around, but thank you very much, Sergio. It's so great to see you again.
Thanks for the invitation, Michael. I hope we can meet each other either in the AAA or to visit in Westchester, or you coming to Mexico.
Absolutely. Okay. I can't wait to travel again.
Okay. Take care, Michael, very much. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for everybody who was patient enough to stay during the webinar, and the people who participated.
Yeah.
Students who are somewhere there as well. Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Well, have a good rest of the day. I know it's a big day.
I'm going out to get my vaccine. Okay, see you.
Vaccine.
Take care. Vaccine. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.